Before athletes had podcasts, private jets, and million-dollar autograph deals, retired sports legends traveled town to town doing charity dinners in hockey arenas, banquet halls, Legion basements, and somehow one guy from Woodstock, Ontario ended up in the middle of it all. His name is Lee McDonald. Lee, to start this whole thing off, we're going to talk about the fact that you did this for what? Better part of 20, 30 years?
Well, yeah, close to 20.
So it was a different world then.
Mm-hmm. Sure
and
was.
I got to ride shotgun a number of times because back then, no internet, no cell phones, and it was word of mouth and a good old handshake. Thus, behind the handshake. So the culture of sports dinners, originally, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think back in the day, in the late 80s when I started in the business, you could... put 300-400 people in an auditorium, sell the tickets, and the cost of the celebrities was low enough that you could make a decent profit for the fundraiser, right? So for whatever charity you were working on behalf of. Every small town, if you look at, Wallaceburg, Woodstock, Mitchell, these small cities around here, they were still able to turn a profit. Unfortunately, as we know, years later that changed because the rates for the individuals went way up.
Well, right? The Woodstock one, which we were both involved with for probably 20 some odd out of the 25 years they had it, saw the whole paradigm shift from that time where it was basically, because you sat on the committee as I did, it was like, well, I know somebody that is neighbors with so-and-so. Mm-hmm. It was a matter of reaching out, and that's how it all began for you. Basically, once you started your representation, and we'll talk about some of the names that you've represented over the years, but it was Woodstocks, for example, was $65.
Yes.
Family friendly, take the family of 5 down there, and it wasn't gouging, but you got to see a whole host of some top names and idols that you grew up with.
Yeah, and I think that was the obvious draw in these cities. I mean, how often is Jean Beliveau or Frank Mahovlich going to come to your town? I mean, I'm using mostly hockey players because, right, this being Canada.
We're hockey, yeah.
That was hockey. But you know what? I mean, they still loved, the guys like some of the fighters that I had and some of the baseball players like Lou Brock, 3,000 hits, and he was stolen base leader at the time I was repping him. We
had him at that time.
Yes.
When Ricky Henderson broke his record.
Broke his record, yeah. So, for these small cities... it was great for them to have a hero come, and that's why they pay the money.
Mm-hmm. And with the small town venues such as Woodstock, you got to treat it to Lake Erie Perch. It was a real hometown, small town feel. And some of these athletes, original 6 guys primarily, and you represented a lot of them, didn't have a whole lot of money, didn't make a whole lot of money.
No.
And especially when their careers were done, they all went on to different vocations and a variety of different fields, and even. Well, some of them were playing had to do things like the story of Eddie Shack selling Christmas trees, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and they all had off-season jobs. Mm-hmm. Gordy was a rep for Eaton's, and Gordy actually, I think, said it the best when he said, he says, I was in the league 13 years before I could afford to fly mom and dad to Detroit from Saskatchewan, where he lived in Floral. He says, I 13 years before I could afford to fly him in. And he says, now, the young guys, he says, they one season, they can buy an airplane.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, and you know what? Yeah. That's not completely unrealistic.
Yeah. No, not at all, but the history of Gordy, and we're going to be talking about him in depth in later podcasts, but part of that was the fact that Jack Adams took a little bit of an advantage of him as well.
Well, I think so did what's his name, the fellow, Harold Ballard.
Oh, geez, yeah.
He did the same thing.
Sure.
They really played with these guys' minds, and they had ways of keeping the wages down, right? Of saying, it's like if you discuss your wage with X, then, and we find out.
You're getting sent down.
You're gone, you're gone. Down. So that's how they tried to keep them quiet.
Yeah, plus it was almost like slavery back then, too, with all the, the Wirtzes in Chicago and Jack Adams, he was the general manager in Detroit, but, the movie Net Worth featuring Al Waxman, he would say, well, Gordy, you led the league in this and led the league in that, and I think we can get a little bit more out of you. And Colleen was the brains in the family, right? Mm-hmm. And Gordy would say, he just loved it for hockey, but that got to upset a lot of other players because you couldn't ask for a raise because you weren't as good as Gordy because he was making that.
Well, Gordy was pretty much his entire career, he got 10% every year. He started off at $2,000? So how long would it take to get up to what's a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah.
Most of his career.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
And until he got the WHA, and that all changed.
So you did these church banquet halls and the legions and auditoriums and stuff like that, and you would partner at some point during this, in probably the first 10 years of your tenure with that, with other communities that if you had to fly somebody in, you would forge a deal to maybe share airfare, or how would you like this person, and start to work that angle as well.
We were able to work a lot of back-to-back events, or there might have been a day in between. Excuse me, but the group still went for it because it did save them quite a bit of money. It was like not a 2 for 1 or 1.5. That was so it did save them money.
So you're primarily dealing with community service groups, Lions clubs, JCs.
A lot of it was WDDS in our case in Woodstock. I've worked with just about every cancer, MS.
Because all these dinners, I should say, well, most of them, if not all had a charitable aspect to it, right?
Yes, they were all charitable or nonprofit fundraising.
Right.
They never ever would sell the individuals for profit. It was all fundraising.
So if you had a table of, let's say, 8 to 10 celebrities, maybe that's a little heavy, what would it cost you across the board?
Well, it of course, as you know, it went up over the years. But if I go back to, someone like Henry Richard, more Stanley Cups than anybody in the history of the game of hockey, and he was a couple $1,000s.
Yeah.
Jean Beliveau was a couple $1,000s, and
So
there was like Bauer
for
was
10,000-15,000.
Yeah, a lot of times less. It depending on obviously how many people they wanted to book, but it was reasonable enough. Like I say, that they could turn a profit. Johnny Bauer was like $1,500.
Yeah, and
he was one of the most beloved individuals I ever worked with, next to Beliveau. Yeah. So for $1,500, you can't get them for that kind of money.
You saw the opportunity with booking people into the Woodstock dinner, for example, and then all of a sudden you're talking to somebody from the Lions Club. So, like I said, primarily it was like if you knew somebody that, I got a cottage beside Frank Mihalich and the Muskokas. So you're actually doing that next community a favor by delivering.
Yes.
And so is that when the light bulb went off?
Well, the light bulb didn't go off all that quick. With George Chevella, for instance, when I first booked him, I had no intentions of moving into being a booking agent for it. Wasn't, I just wanted to meet George Chevella, and that opportunity arose.
Before you get there, let's back that up a little bit, because what did you do before all this happened? Before this thing?
I was an account manager for CHEP Canada, which everybody who's ever seen a movie, look at a warehouse, you see these blue pallets that say CHEP.
And do you watch movies looking for the blue pallets?
For the blue pallets, yeah. So I was an account manager for CHEP. And one of my colleagues happened to come in the office one day, and he mentioned that one of his clients was friends with George Chevella. And of course I perked up because, I grew up watching boxing with my dad. So I was a fanatic. I loved the sport. And so to me, George Chevella was a big, big name. Maybe not to a lot of people, because it wasn't one of the big three. It wasn't football, hockey, or baseball, right? It was boxing.
But he was a Canadian treasure.
He was the heavyweight champ for almost 2 decades, for almost 20 years. So that opportunity was there, but I never thought anything of it, of course. And a week later, I was talking to, I believe it was Dave Code, and he's trying to sell me tickets to a sports dinner.
Right. Dave being a local Woodstonian, friend of both of ours, who was on the committee for the Woodstock Sports Dinner.
And he knew how to sell tickets. He did. Right. I didn't want to buy one, but anyway, I said to him, would you have any interest in George Chevella? And he goes, yeah. He said, we'd love to have George. And I said, okay, well, I'll see if I can get in touch with him. And, got the date, and I called, and Dave said, he says, well, the most we can pay him is $1,000, which absolutely blew me away. It's 1988.
And that's a misnomer with a lot of people that attended these sports dinners, outside some of the bigger ones, that a lot of people thought these guys just had the night off and let's go to Woodstock and have a meal and talk to some people.
Yeah, no, that definitely wasn't the case. And I found that out that day when Dave made that offer. So I went back and I said to my coworker, I said, listen, if you can get through to Chevella, I got an opportunity for him. He can come to a banquet in Woodstock. They're offering $700.
Whoa!
So, and a few days later, I get a call and I hear, "Hey, champ, how you doing?" It was Chiavello. So yeah, that was it. That was the beginning of me meeting someone that I greatly admired. But at the Woodstock dinner, I didn't know this, but guys like from St. Thomas and so on, they come to these dinners to try to get guys for their dinner. Right?
Advanced scouting.
Advanced scouting, yeah. It happened everywhere. And, so they went and asked Chiavello, and Chiavello said, well, you have to talk to Lee over there. And so they came and talked to me, and I said, well, I'll check his schedule. I said, he's $1,200.
So for the, the average sports fan that, geez, George Chiavello, because I remember seeing George Armstrong at the Woodstock Fair and got an autograph, but that was the closest that you would get to somebody that was recognizable through athletics or whatever. Yes. So how did that make you feel when George said, no, go talk to that guy there? It's like game on.
Yeah, well, I thought, that was really decent of him. I mean, he could have set the deal himself, taken all the money. His problem was he couldn't drive, so, he needed to be picked up. But no, that's not why. He was a very, very decent guy. And so I booked him into those, the next two dinners. I was Wallaceburg and St. Thomas, I think. And as I was there, and again, no thought of becoming any kind of agent, but I thought, well, I can help Woodstock out by talking to some of these guys, seeing if I can get a phone number, and they gladly gave it to me. I never had one guy say no or call my agent. Right. Yeah, here you go.
See, once again, there's no cell phones back then, or it was like.
And they wanted the money.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. So they got to. So tell me, so George was your first. George was your first.
George was first.
Was your first. Yeah. So outside of thinking, oh, cool, this I can book. Logistics. Now you got to think about, where we're going to stay. How am I getting them to the venue? How am I getting them back?
That was a problem. Because the very first time I did book George, and I rented a limo to pick him up, and I took a couple of buddies, took my dad, because I'm going to make a party of this. It's never going to happen again.
Is that where the other $300?
That's where the other $300 went. Like I said, I'm thinking this is never happening again, so I'm going to make a day of it. Cool. But then after that, and I mean, I had a full-time job. Thankfully, I had a lot of freedom in my job, so I could go pick him up and make sure he got where he was going. And as far as the accommodations, they'd set that all up. I always say, where are we staying? Because that's where we'd go. We wouldn't go to the venue. If it was somewhere where we were staying the night, we'd go to the motel, check in. And
so was there any negotiation there saying, well, we need this much money? And was there a rider per se?
There was often a lot of negotiation, like that's too much, or can we bring it down a bit? So I was left a bit of room to bring it down, or work something out. And but a lot of times, no. A lot of times they were happy with the price. I mean,
so it wasn't like George saying, "Hey, you got me $1,000. Can you get me 15?" kind of thing, or he just left it up to you?
No, he left it up to me. You know what? They all did. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would ask them. I'd say, "So what do you normally get?" Well, I get around this or around that. Okay. And I'd quite often, like with Mahavlich and even with the Montreal Canadiens, say, look, they got a little less. And they'd never, ever turn me. They never said, no, I'm not doing that for that. It's not as if I took a lot off. But yeah, they would negotiate. The players, well, they were very decent in terms of accepting sometimes a little bit of a lower rate, but for the most part, the rates were pretty steady.
And you learn pretty quickly to make sure you treat them right as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
That was the one thing. A lot of them told me is they appreciated the fact that they knew they were going to get paid. Mm-hmm. Number one, and they weren't going to get mistreated. Because a lot of times they'd show up. Oh, we're going here. We're going to my brother Bill's house.
Right. Yeah.
With Belleville once they talked to Jean and. They asked Jean if he would put on an apron and push a wine cart around to the tables. Just
as a novelty thing?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. This is a very dignified individual. Jean Belleville. And of course, I said, I don't think that's appropriate. And they weren't happy with me, but there's no way Mr. Belleville was going to do that. And he appreciated the fact, because they went to him first. And then he came to me. And
do you think he was going to do it?
He didn't want to tell them no. He wanted me to.
But he was such a congenial gentleman. I can't imagine anybody ever asking him to do something.
Neither can I.
Must have been a Maple Leaf fan.
Must have been. I mean, ask Eddie Shack. Go ahead. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know how much wine there'll be by the time he gets to the first table, but
yeah. And so George, after Woodstock, just it's cliche, but he opened a bunch of doors for you in that respect of getting your foot in the door.
Well, he did. And as I said, I'd get the names and numbers for the other guy. And my thought was for Woodstock. I can really help that out.
Yeah.
But then as it grew, I eventually did come to the realization that, this would make a good part-time job, get to meet a lot of people. And it grew fairly rapidly, because what happened was after, a few years, I represented some baseball players and some boxers, Carmen and Basilio, Floyd Patterson. And then I progressed into hockey, and that went rapidly, because what happened was people like Eddie Litzenberger, Carl Brewer, and some other guys, they would give me the alumni list. It had the names of every alumni that ever played for that team. Had the name, phone number, and address. Now I got everybody.
With probably the guarantee, and they're doing that because of the guarantee of picking up a couple $100 for this and that.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. So George kind of opened these doors for you, and you started getting yourself organized. And at what point did you start reaching out to other communities, or did that take care of itself?
It took care of itself a bit around here. But, we wound up Estevan, Saskatchewan, Vancouver several times.
So these people are contacting you from out west?
Well, there was initially I would call City Hall and say, "Do you guys have a sports dinner?" Say, "Well, who do I talk?
Okay.
Who do I talk to get tickets?" Well, here's so and so. He's a committee member, and I call them and I say, "Are you interested in this and that?" One thing that helped out a lot was the speakers bureaus out there. I was very unique because I was originally all just sports, where Speakers Bureau had guys that would come out and give talks, or they'd represent some musicians and things like that.
And they would pay to be a part of that service.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But they started calling me looking for hockey players.
Right.
So that was a good bit of business too.
And so George was the beginning. And you had him in Woodstock a number of times, because I know you were good enough to bring him to the radio station a few times, because I always got that traditional punch meat picture. And I was not right for a few weeks. But no, but then he went on your sons had mentioned too that at one point because he had a tragic life, right?
Yes.
You had him back talking to high schools about the evils of drugs and things such as that.
Yeah.
I remember you asked me to one event at, it was then called The Club, just kind of a bar, Springbank Plaza. And so he'll take us on watching probably the second Ali fight. And he broke it down frame by frame, and it was just outstanding.
Yep.
And I think he liked that atmosphere too. And the recall he had for somebody that, not that he got punched a whole lot, but, I think he really enjoyed his time in Woodstock. And I think as many times as you had him back, people gravitated to him as well and made him feel very welcome.
Yeah. He really liked this the city. And Carl Brewer was another one, the former Leaf.
Yeah.
Troy Red Wing. Carl loved Woodstock. He always told me, unfortunately he passed away young, but he told me, he says, when I'm done and when I retire, I'm going to move to Woodstock.
Is that right?
Yeah, he loved it.
Yeah.
George and I actually did the Ollie Chevallo fights we did it in Tavistock, at that little bar in Tavistock. And
the Arlington.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a few other little places, and they went over well.
Fun fact, I think Daryl Sittler's mother managed that place at one time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. He used to have a morning show. But anyway. So that was the beginning. So did you ever make it a full-time venture? You always held on to your paying job, so to speak?
No. I had a couple of paying jobs in between, because things did slow down. I had an off season. And then things picked up. I started getting more celebrity golf tournaments, which I wasn't doing much in the summer. Our dinner was in May, but a lot of them were January, February, March, which was odd, because that's the time when it's toughest to travel. But that's the way it was.
Yeah. And down the line during the podcast, we're going to talk about a couple of tournaments we did collectively, you, me, and the Club Pro at Interkip, and we had Hall of Famers from 4 different sports, and the key there was take care of the wives.
Yes.
And the men will come, kind of thing.
Yes.
So as far as George, the world of boxing, did he open up any of those? Like I know that you did a number of things with Carmen Basilio, 3-time former world welterweight champion.
Twice middleweight.
Some major classic fights kind of thing.
Yeah.
So was that through the boxing establishment, so to speak, or how did you trip upon him?
Well, I started to spend a lot of time in Rochester, the Rochester Boxing Hall of Fame.
Right.
Of which, of course, Carmen and many other boxers were a member of. And Carmen lived just outside of Rochester in a little town called Irondequoit. And so I just got to know him. I just started hanging out with him. And I booked him, I think, in 1989 for the first time. And we just became close friends. He was like a grandparent to my sons.
Right.
And Carmen and Josie came and stayed at my parents' place in Woodstock when we were doing some golf tournaments. So,
And what did your dad think of that?
well, Dad was back in the 50s when Carmen was active. They had this thing called Gillette Friday Night Fights.
Friday Night Fights, yeah.
So Dad would be
Black and
sitting.
white?
Yeah, well, not black and white, radio.
Oh, radio.
Yeah, we're talking 57, 58 before they
All right.
had a TV. And so he'd sit there and he'd listen to Carmen and Sugar Ray Robinson or Carmen and Gene Fulmer, And so now, many, many years later, this man that was inside his radio is now sitting in his living room. And I'm sitting there beside Carmen. We're watching Jeopardy, Carmen's favorite show.
Yeah.
He wasn't good at it. But anyway, I'm just sitting there, we're watching TV, and all of a sudden I get this elbow in my ribs. And, what's that all about? And he leans over and he says, tell your dad to stop staring at me or I'm going to go over and knock him out. Yeah.
Well, that was an homage to your dad. One of his favorite boxers, and having listened to him and stuff like that. Now he's there in the flesh and blood, and one of the small rewards by doing something such as that. And you must have felt that warmth when you're taking celebrities too, because I know the Woodstock dinner, we'd always take a couple to the Legion and talk to the veterans around the bars and stuff like that.
Right.
You would stand a little distance away and just look at these guys and the glee they had on their face. Because I remember one time we took Basilio. They go to the hospital first.
Yes.
Then the Legion. It was just up the street. And I remember Carmen walked in and guys just gathered around him and he's telling stories and stuff. It was the same year you had John Ferguson, too, from the Montreal Canadiens.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And Fergie and I are standing on the periphery of this gaggle around Basilio. And then finally Ferguson had enough and he broke into the huddle and he said, I had more televised fights than this clown. But it was kind of interesting to move those guys around. And it wasn't just about, there was always the charitable aspect and there was a tour of developmental services, but it would have been kind of neat just to see the reaction of the people that you treated people to in that regard. Because you had the resources and the contacts to do that. Yeah,
I was always really impressed with the turnout and the way people would react. Because I think, George Chevelle was not a real... But I didn't realize how popular these guys... Floyd Patterson, wonderful man, great guy. And these people really enjoyed them.
So we're talking to Lee McDonald behind the Handshake, a podcast that's going to be exploring the wonderful world of pro sports back in the would be 80s and 90s, when things seemed to be a little bit much more simpler, and all the people that you met and represented along the way. And we're going to be talking about such names as, any high profile guys come to mind?
Well, certainly Gordie Howe.
Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey.
Mr. Hockey and Davy Keon.
Davy Keon. You got a great story about Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And then we'll even talk about some of the TV and movie personalities that you've rubbed elbows with as well.